says, "Dear writing writer, thank you for being here with us today. Can you share more where you got the inspiration for our Naswada's character? She's one of my all-time favorite queens."
I mean, first of all, thank you for the introduction. Thank you all for being here today. Are you guys hearing us okay, or do we need to speak louder? Louder, all right, we'll be louder, all right. And big thanks, Sean, Terry, Robin, thank you so much for being here today. Also, to answer your question, that character was actually inspired by a picture I saw in a news magazine back in the 90s of a woman who had actually lost her family in an airline crash. And it was just a stunning picture, and there was something about it that made me feel like I wanted to write a character who had that sort of strength. And that was the inspiration for Naswada.
Here's what I'm going to start at the end. We're going to ask Sean and Terry and then Chris, what is the first book you read? And it's a fantasy that has you emotionally invested. I think this is a good one.
All right. How many of you started reading one of the people up here when you were 12 or 13? Oh yeah. Okay. Says the older statesman on the panel. No, I actually read The Sword of Shannara when I was 12. And my mother brought home a beat-up copy that she was supposed to read from the women that she worked with. They gave it to her and said, "You have to read this." And being 12, I said, "No, you don't. I get to read it." And because I love the cover, it had a great cover on it. And so I read that book, and that was the first time that I had my heart ripped out, because there's a certain dwarf in that book that ends in a terrible way. And I remember being 12, weeping a couple tears because of that. So yeah, Sword of Shannara for me.
Yeah, me too. Actually, I think the first book I read that really impacted me in the fantasy world, at least, was Knights of the Round Table. And I read that early on, and this was really before Tolkien and everything else even existed. Well, at least as far as I know. And I remember as kids how our neighborhood got together and we got on bicycles with broomsticks and garbage cans and rode at each other. This is true. That's what our mothers taught us.
I'm going to add something on there real quick too. I'm reading Lev Grossman's The Bright Sword, which comes out next year, and it's Arthurian, and it's fantastic. So next year, in the middle of July, if you like Arthur stuff, there you go.
I read a lot of folk tales and mythology and more Arthur growing up. But I mean, in terms of fantasy, I read kind of 3 books simultaneously that all hit me like a ton of bricks, and I wish I had the opportunity to read them for the first time again. And those were The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, The Hobbit, and The Wizard of Earthsea. And I read them all within like 3 weeks. And it was an experience that I have not yet recovered from. In fact, I think it's why I'm sitting here.
Mine was a very obscure one that I doubt anybody else in the room has ever heard of. It's called The Joyous Story of Astrid. And it's about a writer who lives in the woods, and somebody abandons this little baby girl on his doorstep, and she doesn't speak. And it was written by, oh my goodness. Okay, the woman was an expert on Japan, but she wrote under an assumed name because it was a very, not the kind of book she was expecting to write. But it was just absolutely magical. It would have been given to my mother because my mother had the name of Astrid, so when she was pregnant, she was given this book, which I eventually read when I was 8 or 9 years old. And that was my first real dip into totally fresh fantasy, not mythology, not fairy tale, but total fantasy. And it really set my feet on the path. The joyous story of Africa. So I've got a big stack here, Chris. I'm trying to find
So I got a question. This is for Terry. Terry knows this. I don't know if any of you know this, but the very first convention I ever did was San Diego Comic-Con. And I ended up on a panel. At 19, I was on a panel with China Mieville, Peter David, and Terry Brooks. And the title of the panel was Fantasy Tropes, or something like that. And they were all very nice to me, but Terry took me under his wing and was very kind to give me some advice on the world and life of being a writer and everything. So it's really cool to be here 20 years later and to be doing a panel again. So in the immortal words of Freud, Terry, so first of all, thank you. In the immortal words of Freud, how does that make you feel?
Makes me wish I had a cool hat. I sat with a lot of very famous writers, people who were all down dead. People like Arthur C. Clarke and Royce Caswell. But they had one thing in common that I did not, and that is they were all science fiction writers, because there was no fantasy to speak of in those days. This was before Tolkien and all the rest. So that was a little bit different experience, but I do remember the impact of sitting there and listening to them tell me how I was never good at making it. Finally.
Following on that, I've got a question here that was from somebody in the audience saying, did you ever think about just completely giving up and walking away from writing? And what did you do about it? Sean, how about you?
Boy, that's tough. I mean, this is therapy session 101 for me. Yes, I have thought about it several different times, but I always go back. Whenever I feel that way, I recognize it's only a feeling. And honestly, that's something that Terry's wife, Judine, told me one time, right when I was graduating college here at the University of Washington. We were talking about how I just wrapped up my college career, and I had just finished a major grading class, and I did really well in it. And she said, "Oh, great. Well, now you can write Shannara in the future and keep our kids in the lifestyles they grow accustomed to." And I went, aha, I could be a writer. And then I've had downs ever since. So yeah, I mean, it happens. It does happen. But I think the one constant is whether or not you're going to write because you love it, or if you write because you want to make a living at it. And even if I ever come to a point where I'm not making money at it, I think I would still want to wake up every morning and write, because it's just in my DNA.
I think all of us up here will tell you exactly the same thing. And that is, if you can be made to give up, you should. You should never, ever even think about giving up. You just find a better way. You learn, you spend time being, learning how to get past the difficulties, but you can't listen to other people and say, well, what you do, because everything's out there ready to tell you why you can't do this. It's like any other sport, you know? And all of us do it because this is all we know. In our hearts. This is what we know.
So the funny thing is, about 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago, in the last round of revisions and edits for Murtagh, the timing was tight, to put it mildly. And I got to a point where I started stomping around the house saying, that's it, I'm done, this is the last book. I am gonna find another line of work. I'm gonna go be a woodworker, a carpenter. I can never again am I doing this. But I finished the book. Thank you. And you know what? As soon as I managed to meet that deadline, all I could think of was what I wanted to write for the next book. So yeah, there are good days and there are bad days, but Terry's completely right that you face the problems and then figure out how to solve them, and then hopefully you circumvent some of those problems the next time around. And the cool thing with books is each new book gives you a new set of problems. It's never the same from book to book.
You know what? Sorry to interrupt you, but it just reminds me that this is why editors tell you to start the next book before you finish the one you're on. Keep going, because by the time you get to the point where you just had the last book, you're already so deeply involved in the next one you can't quit.
Okay, I'm gonna throw in a question right now. Sean, Terry, and Chris, you've all written science fiction as well as fantasy. What was different about that experience? We start a little this way this time. So what was different about writing SF as opposed to this?
Well, I will do it again. For the rest of my life, I'm going to be bouncing between the Fractalverse, which is my sci-fi, and the World of Eragon. Well, the difference for me was that when you break the laws of physics in science fiction, you just say, well, you inverted the tachyon beam and da-da-da-da-da. And when you break the laws of physics in fantasy, you just wave your hands and say, a wizard did it. But more seriously, I really enjoyed using the modern vocabulary. That's part of the reason I wrote sci-fi, is to have a chance to use the modern vocabulary. And I did find that because I was trying to be semi-realistic with my timings and technologies and all that, that the spaceship's travel was much more restrictive. In fantasy, if you need to go from point A to point B a little bit faster, you can always say, well, they ran a little faster. They spurred the horses a little faster. They're all heroes. They can get a little more out of them. But with the distances involved in space, it doesn't matter if you get your spaceship going a little faster. Given the distances, it really doesn't matter. So it imposed a lot more hard limits on the timing of my story. But aside from that, all the same world building skills, character building skills, pacing, structure, all of that still applies.
I know the answer. The answer is very simple. I've written 44 books. 43 of those books were fantasy. And those 43 books all sold very well. The last one, Street Freaks, which is a science fiction book that crossed a lot of boundaries I hadn't crossed before, and I had a really good time with it, and it did not sell.
Terry, I'll let you know, I do have a question here. When are you going to do Street Freaks 2?
That isn't the question I was expecting. I'll get it. I guess I could say something about something else. I'm supposed to make an announcement tonight, so I might as well make it now. I do have another Street Freaks book on the boards, but I haven't done anything with it. There's a really lot of that.
Just so he knows. Put that on your bulletin board.
What the hell? So anyway, I'm writing more shadow books. I wasn't going to do, and
You're all stunned, right?
yeah, I'm actually almost done. But the thing is, what I said was very carefully, I was not going to advance the series beyond where it ended, because I felt like I'd said everything I had to say about what's coming up, but I haven't actually gone back to the past. So I'm going to begin next year with a series of books in class, that's dealing with well, I can't tell you anything. But I'm happy enough with it and published that. They're feeling it's an important effort. So, I'm at an age where I have to think about the future being short. And I know that my productivity and so forth is not going to continue at the rate that it has for the past 60 years or more. But in any case, so with that in mind, my whole plan now is to use whatever time I have left to write something important enough and meaningful enough to me that it will have that resonance with you. So I'm ready to go through that.
I'm going to say something really quick on the Street Freaks here. I published Street Freaks for Terry. It's a book near and dear to my heart. I loved that book when I first read it, and I still love it, and I want the sequel too. So whoever asked that, good job. Your check is going to be in the mail soon. To answer the question, and also, yay, more Shannara. Hello! And I can't wait to get it next week in the mail. I'll start that. To answer the question, I have written a science fiction novel, and The Tempered Steel by T.P. Gray and Novella, The Unknown Life of Jack Dredd. And I wrote it because I just had this very clear first image of the first page, the event that was going to happen, and I had to write it. There was no other, I couldn't ignore it, it wouldn't leave me alone. It's very different than my other writing, but I super appreciate it for what it is, and it's found I get more emails about the sequel of that book than I think my other work. So it's good to separate and do something different. I think probably everybody up here could agree with that. You got to stretch your wings a little bit as writers, and so trying something new is always good.
Well, unsurprisingly, most of the questions here are actually for Chris, so I'm just going to.
Hold on, Robin,
Hard.
when's your epic space opera coming? I got a new one.
Space. So you have to keep the these are actually all.
Be careful, Christopher. I've seen Robin punch somebody out before, so.
It says, what inspired you to write the book? And what is your top?
Can't take them anywhere. Well, so what inspired me to write it? I've always planned on writing more books in the World of Eragon. But the specific answer is I'm going to blame this book on one of you. Because in 2017, someone sent me a tweet. It was pretty late at night. And someone sent a tweet said, I'm paraphrasing, hey Christopher, what are Murtagh and Thorn up to after the end of the inheritance cycle? And I was a little past my bedtime, a little punchy, so I said something along the lines of, Murtagh just enchanted a fork and called it Mr. Stabby and used it to win a big fight. Thorn isn't too happy with him. And the horrible thing is I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so that became the basis for the first story in my short story collection, The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm. And then when that was launching, I was in New York City having dinner with my editor, and I leaned across the table and I said, hey, Michelle, I think I got a full-length book out of this. And she just said, do it. So that's where it came from. Also, the fact that I wanted to explore this character more and wanted to explore the world more. So, but again, I'm blaming it on you guys. So thank you. As for favorite characters, the Dragon Saphira, Murtagh, and Elva, because she's creepy.
So question for each of you. How did your education affect your writing? to be a lawyer?
Yeah, I got past that. I mean, I had a full board education all through law school and beyond that has served no purpose in the world. Solid for about 8 years, 2 marriages. So, you know, I think what we take from our education, people, I took from my education, which was mostly English literature. I always say the only two things I really learned that stayed with me were public speaking, which I took in high school because my parents insisted I do something worthwhile, or the alternative typing, yes. In those days, I will not keep them, of course, and they stayed with me, so I remember those, and some English books. But other than that, you know, most of what I learned on the side, but I can't talk about that. Yeah, what you learn isn't just what you read in books or what you get in school or what you learn from the teachers. Those are the people who, and the books and so forth, that formulate the ways in which you learn and involve you in the things that you might not otherwise know about. So that there's a broad canvas there that you can draw on. But I think, you know, you're not the same person. Here's a surprise. And I learned that at 8 years of age. I am not the same person as I was at 20 in any way, shape, or form. Hardly, other than not. The things that I learned along the way change all the time. And your fixations on things and the impulse, the things that have an impact on you, all of those things change. And what I loved when I was 20 years old now is something entirely different. And that's just the way life works. So your education is a broad spectrum, as we all know. But if you look back on it, you could probably have a whole series of odd, eccentric things that had an impact on your life. I was talking about books that you remember, right? You remember books, but they don't all follow the whole time. Do they follow the same path? You only read one thing and nothing else? So tell me that. You know, you just have to be open to the fact that there are a lot of things out there. My wife tells me what to read because she knows what it is that I love, but I don't. And I say all the time, she says, read this. And for a long time I said, I don't read this sort of thing. I'm not interested in romance. I'm not interested in this kind of thing. And I learned never, ever, ever to do that. Because the things she was recommending always stayed with me because they were so impactful at the time I read them. And I think that's the way we are about books and about stories and about tales. Is at a certain time, something really means something to you that wouldn't otherwise. And you can think back about that in your life. And all forms of entertainment. There's always a movie or there's a TV show or there's a book or any number of things. That at the time you read it or hear it or whatever, or play, that really means something to you because of the space you're in at that particular moment. Is that significantly impactful?
Education. Talking about education, right? So I am a UW graduate with a biochem degree. Biochemistry and fantasy, do those two things go together? They do, and I'll tell you why. Most people don't believe it. It's all puzzles. It's all puzzle pieces. That's all biochem is, and that's all writing a book is. It's little tiny pieces that you're stringing together to have a specific outcome. That's what it is. Then I got cancer in the middle of all that. And I realized, do I really want to be in a chemistry lab for my whole life?
This is something to set up for the fantasy version of Breaking Bad.
Yeah. I got the look already. Other good leather jacket, I think. No, and that moment really changed things for me because I realized, you know what, I always loved writing. And so I went back and I got a creative writing degree too, just as a foundation. I did not learn what I do now until this man right here took me to the Maui Writers Conference, writing retreat. And I learned more in 2 weeks there, actually, about writing than I did during my time at UW as a writer. Really, really fascinating looking back on it. And what Terry says is very true. There are moments in your life kind of add up, and you look back on them, and those are the moments that really make you who you are as a writer.
Education is where you find it.
Yeah, and education is where you find it. And being surrounded by different people, different ideas, different philosophies is super important, at least to me anyway. What about you, Christopher? How did that work out for you? Because you became a phenom very early.
Yeah, I mean, everything Terry said is, I think, absolutely true, and that kind of is the definitive answer from top to bottom here. But my experience was being homeschooled, since my mom is a trained Montessori teacher. So when my sister and I were born, she started teaching us right from the very beginning, and that snowballed. So by the time we were ready for first grade public school, we were already a couple of grades ahead, and we were living up in Anchorage at the time. And because so many kids get educated out of the bush up there, if you're coming back into the school system, they actually require the kids to take a psychiatric test. And between that and my parents not wanting us to either be held back or put with kids who were a lot older than we were, they decided, well, you know, this homeschooling thing seems to be working pretty well for us, so let's just keep going with it. And we did that up until we were ready for high school, and then we used an accredited distance learning school called American School. So this was pre-internet, so everything was done with letters through the mail and textbooks and stuff like that. So we got actual high school diplomas, no GEDs. And I graduated from at 15, mainly the result of not taking any summer breaks my whole life. Thank you, Mom. And then I started writing because I was bored out of my brains living in rural Montana, no internet, no driving, no job, no school. And there's a whole story there that I won't get into where I'll be talking for an hour because that's like a major part of presentations I often do. But the long and short of it is that if I had been in school, even just high school, I don't think I would have had the time to write. I don't multitask at all. When I was going through high school, I would just pick one topic, one subject like Algebra 2, and I would blow through Algebra 2 in like 2 weeks. And then I would do whatever the next course was. Multitasking does not work for my brain. Same thing with writing. So having the freedom to just focus on the writing day in, day out, at that age, it's such a formative age. And then of course, in terms of actual education, because I was planning to go to college, I applied to Viridian College in Portland, they offered me a full scholarship, but I had been working on Eragon too long at that point, couldn't give it up. So, but in terms of education, I got the best education in the world from my editors, from my parents, and then from the editor I worked with at Random House. It's the best writing experience I could have hoped for. And before Eragon came out, my editor and agent actually flew out to Montana to meet me, which was pretty unusual for the Random House to do that. But, you know, here was this kid they were going to be putting out into the world, and they kind of wanted some face-to-face time. So they came out, and my agent and editor, we went on a hike together, and they pulled me aside and said, look, Christopher, we know you're young. If you want to go to college, if you want to get a degree, we absolutely support that. If you ever go to a writing class, we will stage an intervention. So, but because I didn't go to college, I made a real conscious effort to continue learning through my whole life. So I listened to an insane amount of college courses and watched lectures and read books. You know, there were vast holes in my knowledge as a result, but I also know a lot about a lot of different things. And that's the cool thing about writing is, you know, you need to know how to rig a sailboat all of a sudden for a story, or how to forge a sword, or do any number of things. And then you go learn it. That's right. How about you?
Oh, I'm a college dropout. I got married at 18 and had 4 children, pretty quick succession there. And as Chris was saying, when you get interested in something, you go back and take an individual course, whether it be how to graft fruit trees or advanced biology or whatever it is that captures your interest. So I've never managed to conglomerate it into any kind of degree, but I've taken a lot of very strange courses and read a lot of very good books, mostly to, as Chris noted, your character needs to know something, and so you have to go research beekeeping to be convincing enough that your character sounds like she knows what she's talking about, even if you're right. So I've got another one and this one was targeted, personally, I think it's a good one for any of the writers here. Have you ever killed a character that you later regretted because it would have been good for a later story?
Looking back, do you regret what you've done?
You regret taking a character off the
No, never. I kill them all again.
You stole what I was gonna say, but they all deserve to die.
I would say I have never killed a character. Sometimes in the course of the story, it is logical for a character to die. And if, as a writer, you put a little magic umbrella over that character and say, oh, I don't want that to happen. You stuck your finger into the story world and you messed up the whole story and it's never going to be the same. So if your character, even a beloved character, is going to die, you have to write it. You have to be true to the story.
So now I have a question for everyone here, because pursuant to all this, I'm a big believer in outlining. So when I kill a character, it's been pre-planned for a long time, and I know why I'm doing it and what it does for the story. So, Terry, Sean, Robin, I mean, how much do you outline your plot before you actually start writing?
I write a very careful and detailed outline. I give it to the editor, and then I set it aside and I write the book. And I write another book, and it would be
And your editor never goes back and looks at that original outline and goes, what the hell? I grew up very Terry Brooksian, obviously. I've been his webmaster a long time. I'm very influenced by him. And early on, when I started writing, he told me, Sean, you need to outline because it will save you a lot of grief until you learn what you're doing. I still outline because I still haven't learned everything that I need to learn, at least I feel like that. So I'm with Christopher on that one. I actually outline a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Every once in a while, a character does die, though, that I did not expect. So when I get there, I'm like, no, this guy needs to go.
According to my clock, it's 6:58, so I think we have about 2 minutes left before we have to adjourn to the timetable. Is that right, Howard?
Since we started a little bit late, I'm thinking we could maybe do 10 extra minutes to go to like 7:10.
Milo was giving us 10 extra minutes. This is the love of Milo.
I'm really sorry that a lot of us people Christopher, I have gone through the entire schedule about who your most upcoming fantasy author is. You can totally roll me right now, it's being obnoxious, but
It's me.
if you had an author in the last 2 years that you feel like you can scratch with an upcoming fantasy author that maybe you don't know about TikTok or Instagram or the ether of the internet, I'd love to hear it.
Oh, easily.
I'm just going to bow out of this because I have managed to do 2 books in 2 years while having 2 kids in 2 years. The most recent book I read is the Murtagh Diaries. I've got no idea. I'm sorry.
I've got probably too many favorite authors who don't seem to get the attention that they deserve. So I would say he has a number of books out there. I would say look at Mark Lawrence. If you haven't heard of him, you should, and you'll be happy to pick up any of his. Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Alex Harrow is the most exciting young female writer I know. without knowing her actually at all. But her books are just astonishing. She has one out now called Starlit House. Starlit House is the best book I've read, except for T.J. Coogan. T.J. Coogan makes me cry when I read his books. He is so good. He is so gentle. At the same time, so right on target when he's talking about people's emotions. I don't read as many epic fantasy studies too, but there's some good ones out there for sure. I just really finished one by these initial people. Another young lady, she's not so young, Lee Schwab.
Oh, yes.
Amazing writer.
She's quite talented. But there's an example, Marie Lou. A lot of young adult fiction writers working in the field. This is too bad. You know, it's amazing. I find new people all the time and make it a point to look for new writers all the time in my field. Even in any level of writing, because there's so much good work being done right now, which was not true when I was growing up, and not true when I was first publishing. So you believe me, if there's something you're looking for out there, you can find it in a bookstore or something that will help you find it.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, this is going to sound like a commercial, treat it as such, I suppose, but I read House in the Cerulean Sea because this man told me to read it. And I loved it so much that my publishing company, Grimo Press, I decided to pitch that to my partners as one of our projects, and actually the pre-order is coming out tomorrow for a full color special edition of that book because I loved it so much. He is doing some really phenomenal work, and he has moved to the Pacific Northwest. So we will see him. So we will see him more often here, which I'm really excited about.
So here's a good one. What is it about a series that draws you back to writing in it? And that word, again and again.
Greed. I kid.
Well, obviously, they all start with the same, or end with the same word. So once you get started in the series, this is interesting because I didn't think about it when I started. I just sort of went with it. And so I wrote the first 3 Shannara books, and then I wrote 3 Magic books, and then I wrote some more Magic books, and then, you know, more Shannara books. And I got in on a cycle of doing some of each as I went. And the first thing I knew, I had at least 40-some books. And I discovered if you do this, you should know something. That once you start, you might not one day want to finish. Starting.
Tell the Jar Jar number.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that if you better make sure you start soon enough that you don't find yourself unable to remember things. Like I did. And this first Shannara book, I couldn't remember a thing. I didn't remember anything, and I had to go back and reread those books, and then you discover that there's all these compendium books that I didn't write. And so I have to go back and see what they said, and it becomes a nightmare. I don't believe, and I will never do it again.
Christopher's came back to the World of Eragon after a few years right there. What drew you back to that?
I mean, I think as I started to get some elements burned from my brain, and having written some one-off books now and coming to write this book, there's definitely an advantage to, you know, writing stories with characters you've been with so long. You just get to know them in a way you just can't in a single book. At least I can't. I'm not Dostoevsky, or Tolstoy, for good or for ill. But you know, having an opportunity to be with these people over thousands and thousands of pages and over years of their lives, there's very little that compares to that. And there's comfort to it. There's understanding there. And in this case, with this book, writing it was like returning home after a long absence. Mind you, Murtagh has announced a horrible time in the book. So he might disagree. In fact, Rob and I saw a couple of people saying that comparing his trials and tribulations to some of your books, so you know he really has a bad time. Something like that. I think. I love Rob. I do. Seriously, I mean, even with my friend Christopher said it's one and done with this group of characters, you know, as a writer, I'm always thinking, what if, building onto the future. Now I think about what it'd be like to go back and write with some of those characters again, and there's, I don't know, I find it deeply rewarding. For those who don't know, Eragon's under development with Disney Plus for a big Remember your expectations. I cannot guarantee quality, but it is Hollywood. But I'm going to kill myself trying to make something good for you guys.
I think we will now be moving to sign notes, and I think we have some basic rules. It is no more than 3 books. Is that correct?
Yes.
And defer to my own.
Yes, okay.
All rules.
As you came in the door, you were given a wristband. They were issued in the very colors of this our rainbow. If you have a red wristband, you're the first group, etc. We're going to take just a minute to get kind of organized for signing, then I'll call you up by group. The ground rules as they've been laid out are no more than 3 books at a time, signed only. If you have more than that, we're doing personalizations. We ask you at the end, and time billing, we will be able to get to you. I think no photos, you already know that. And basically, thank you so much for coming. This is incredible.
Very important. Thank you, Milo. Thank you, Christopher Bookstore. Thank you very much for having me. I really want all of you to put your hands together with loud yells for Mr. Dwayne Wilkins.